Hi, I'm Tracy, an alcoholic. Yeah, sure. No pressure. Like Nat said, I think my first year was really special, and for some reason my tenure has also been quite special. What kind of stood out for me this year though is when everyone was writing congratulations and on my Facebook wall and whatever, I found a lot of people were talking about when I first came in, and it was a good reminder for me. Like, I'd forgotten about how broken I was when I first came in. I forgot about my self-obsession. I had huge self-obsession when I first came in for about my first year or 2 years of recovery. It was one of my biggest blocks I had to go through. So it kind of was a good reflection and a good gratitude, and I was really grateful to see where I've gone, without this program and without my higher power and my sponsor, it wouldn't have been possible. So it was a good reflection. I think always I'd put a bit of pressure on myself because I thought 10 years has to be amazing, but at the end of the day, this is my story, and it's my truth, and that's all I can share, right from the beginning. I've always been difficult. I always remember being really willful, and God's got a funny way because I've got a very willful child at the moment. So I can kind of see a lot of myself, in him. And right from the beginning, I was really stubborn, a lot of temper tantrums. I remember once getting locked in my room, and I was so cross with my mom that I cut up her gown, and that was where the anger and the stubbornness came from. There was a lot of fighting in my house. My mom and my dad were fighting right from really young. I don't believe that's where my disease came from, but I just always remember that very uneasy feeling. I remember running away and locking the door away from my dad, even though my dad really loved me. There was a lot of violence in our house. Eventually my parents got divorced. I think I was about 4, and I went to go and live with my mom, and it was my mom and I against the world. My dad was, because he was an alcoholic, he wasn't always available. It didn't mean he didn't love me, but he just wasn't always, he couldn't be there always. So it was my mom and I against the world, even though it was very difficult, and remember having lots of temper tantrums. And with my son now, I see a lot of that stuff coming through. The one day we were on our way to school, I was 6 years old. I just had my birthday, and we were in the car, and a Patco bus skipped a red robot, and we were in an accident, and my mum died instantly in front of me. And from then on, my world just changed. Everything just changed really quickly. I don't remember a lot of it. I've been for a lot of therapies and stuff, but I remember the shock, and I remember everyone trying to hide it from me because they didn't know how to explain to a little 6-year-old. So in my head, she was still in the hospital and she was okay. And it took them about a month till they told me. So I had a lot of trust issues around that kind of stuff. Eventually, when they did tell me, in my head I thought I just ate the chocolate and I went to bed, but my dad said in reality I screamed the house down for hours. And after that, my life changed quite a bit because no one really knew how to deal with the situation, and my dad wasn't really equipped either to deal with me, and he went overseas, and I went to go live with my gran for a while, and then I kind of started grade 1. And I just remember always being different. I remember kids were not great about that kind of stuff because I was different, so I got teased quite a lot. Eventually I moved to a private school where I wasn't allowed to tell anyone because they wanted to try and protect me, and I had to tell my dad married my mom's best friend, and I had to pretend that she was my mom. So there was a lot of dishonesty. That's how I kind of lived. Even though they were trying to protect me, it wasn't honest if I look back at it now. And life went on, and my stepmom was really amazing to me. They gave me the best of everything, best private school, best everything. But I always felt uneasy inside, and I changed 7 schools because we were always trying to look for the best school and the best. There was always something wrong. I kind of see it was with me now. Eventually my stepmom had her first child. I was 13, and so my first brother arrived, and I was so jealous. And I hated it, and I hated him, and we decided the best thing at that stage was for me to go to boarding school. So I went to boarding school, and my dad, at the same school my dad went to, he had these huge aspirations for me to be head girl, and he thought it was all going to happen. But as soon as I got there, I got into the wrong crowd. I started smoking, I started banking sport, because I wanted any kind of attention, and my dad wouldn't fetch me every weekend, so the only way I could go home was to get into trouble. Then he would come fetch me, and because he was there anyway, he had to go speak to the principal. The principal saw everybody on a Friday, so at least I got to go home. So any kind of attention for me then, whether it was negative, was attention, and it was okay. Eventually, towards the end of the 3rd term, I got exposed to my first drink. the day boarders brought in a bottle of tequila, and I'd had a fight with one of my girlfriends, and because I wanted attention, I wanted all her attention, and she had a boyfriend, and I just couldn't deal with that. So they opened up this bottle of tequila, and everyone had a drink, and I thought that was great. All of a sudden, everything just disappeared for me. I wasn't cross with my friend anymore. I didn't feel awkward anymore. All I wanted was more. So they kind of had one, and I could deal with it. I kept going back until eventually I was really drunk, and I got caught out, and I told everyone exactly what I thought of them. I was in the principal's house at night, and I told him exactly what I thought of him. So the next morning, and then I passed out. The next morning I woke up tired to my bed, wanted to commit suicide, and I was all dramatic, and that was the first time I ever drank. That was how it was for me. So I had to wake up to everyone really angry with me. I got expelled from school. My dad wanted nothing, my stepmom wanted nothing to do with me. So I kind of had to change from quite quickly. I moved in with my aunt and my 3 cousins, and life was very different because I come from quite a privileged background. There was quite a lot of money into nothing. Like it was very, very different. I moved into Kempton Park in Joburg, and it was very different for me. So I didn't know how to deal with it. So all I did was I slept. I got really, really depressed. I felt very unloved. I couldn't understand why my family didn't want anything to do with me, because I kind of couldn't see it was my behavior. So yeah, at the age of 16, I got put onto my first antidepressant. And that's how it just kind of started for me. I went to school, and I was really, even though I had a car accident on the way to school, I used to pray for car accidents on the way to school every day, because I used to hate it. I hated school. I stopped believing in God, because I was kind of like, if God could take my mother away from me when I was 6, like where the hell was he? Like that was it. So I was like not into religion, even though I was brought up Catholic. I had nothing to do with God. And then I did school, hated it. I finally went to college. I left school early and went to college because there were no rules. I could do what I wanted. And that suited me down to the ground, because I hate rules. If I wanted a long front, if I wanted a short skirt, if I could smoke. So that was where like my life was. It was really cool that I could go to college, and I did hairdressing. And slowly alcohol started like coming into my life. My aunt was very, very strict because she was married to an alcoholic. So I think my curfew when I turned 18 was 11 o'clock. So I just didn't go home for the night, because I was like, well, that's just terrible. Yeah, she was really, really strict and controlled me a lot. But as soon as I could get out of that environment, I did. And all hell broke loose, because every time I drank, I couldn't understand. Like my life just became unmanageable. Like my friends would drink and go home. For me, I would drink and I'd land up in Hillbrow, or I would drink and land up somewhere crazy. Like I just didn't know how to stop it. And then I would try and change what I drank. I tried to eat before I drank, but every time I drank, like it just became unmanageable. I was really scared of taking drugs because of my dad had taken me when I was 13. He found out I was sniffing Tipex thinners at school or out, so he took me into Hillbrow. It's like Point Road, I suppose, here, and it was really eye-opening. He showed me the blue children, he showed me the crack houses, he showed me all sorts of things, and then he took me into rehab to show me what happens. And because of that, like I'm grateful, because it kept me not taking drugs when I was in my teens, because I would have probably been dead by now. But so when I was about 19, I took my first drug because I couldn't control the alcohol anymore. And so when I took the drugs, the alcohol kind of managed itself, and it was the rave scene. Everyone was kind of doing it, and I took my first drug, and I thought, oh my gosh, everybody should be on this. Everybody's so much prettier and nicer. And until Tuesday came, and I wanted to kill myself. But yeah, so that was how it all kind of started for me. How I got into drugs. It first started off recreationally, like however on the weekends. Then I went to a rave, Carl Cox rave, and I met my ex-husband. It was a really messed up situation. I was pregnant with a married man's child, and he was gay, and we just met each other, and that was like it. It was kind of love. From the outside, it looked all amazing. It looked like the white picket fence. My family, for once, were really happy. They thought I was going to get married and go into the sunset and not cause any problems. But from the inside, it was very, very different. We both were addicts, so it was fine for a while. But eventually, after I think we were together for 7 years, eventually our addictions just both went into opposite directions. With myself, I think I was about 22. I was in a shopping centre, and all of a sudden I started getting really, really paranoid. I felt like the police were after me. I felt like there were cameras over me. I started having huge anxiety attacks. And then I kind of landed up in my first psychiatrist's office. And the kind of after they did a little bit of an assessment, and I told them, oh, I'm very up and down, and I'm this and this. I wasn't honest that I was doing like copious amounts of whatever on the weekend. That I was stamped with bipolar, I was stamped with borderline personality, I was stamped with all kinds of, and I was like, yes, that is exactly what is wrong with me. I was so excited because for the first time I had labels. But deep inside me, like I knew that wasn't true, but I kind of went with it. And then my cycle started with psychiatry. I kept going into psych wards. I first started every 18 months, and every time I went in I would get more drugs. And in the beginning it was fun, shame. Everyone was like giving me flowers and feeling really like sad for me, and I got pampered. But the more and more it happened, like people were starting to get irritated. My work started not being so sympathetic anymore. And each time I came out with more drugs, more labels. And obviously my marriage got worse and worse. Eventually after about 7 years of being with my ex-husband, I woke up one day and I was like, I can't do this. I'm over this. I've never actually really loved you, and I did the most selfish thing, and I just left. I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about our 4 cats, our 2 dogs, our families. It was all about me. That's all I ever cared about was me. So I caused a lot of hurt and a lot of damage in that. And everything had just got a lot worse, and I was just like, well, that's it. I'm leaving here. Like, I didn't realize I was doing my first geographical, but I thought that I'd move to Belito and have a surfer life. I bought a scooter. I'd never ever ridden a scooter in my life. I'd never driven because of my fear of my accident with my mum and fear of responsibility. So I didn't even have a license, but I had a scooter and I was going to live the life in Belito, and I found a job quite quickly, and I found a flat, and I was going to live the life, but I came with me. And within 6 months, like the street drugs I could leave behind, but within 6 months with the medication and alcohol, like it brought me to my knees. Like I lost everything. I lost my job, I lost where I was staying, I lost my dignity, I lost my family. Were so upset because it was a small town, and they were obviously hearing about everything that I was getting up to, and I was just getting angry, and like, it's not got nothing to do with you. But and in the meantime, like I'd reached my rock bottom. They had to come and break open the door. I was locked in my flat, like ready to die. Like it was that whole sick and tired, being sick and tired. But I didn't really know, because I'd lived in this like little bubble. Like I kind of thought I was okay. And I went into hospital, and they tried to help me there. And eventually someone phoned my dad and said, like, Tracy's in big trouble. Like, you're going to have to help her. And I got flown to Joburg, and on the plane was my last drink. Like, I didn't know that was my last drink, because I would have probably had more if I'd known it was my last double G&T. But I kind of, in my head, I still thought I was going to be able to get out of this. And I got back to Joburg, and my dad was like, you're not going out, you're going to rehab tomorrow. And he locked me in the room, and I kind of took every tablet I had, because I thought, well, then I'll just rather die. But God obviously had other plans for me, and I landed up in another treatment centre. I'd been into that one a few times before, but this time I was actually in for drugs, which I was not happy about, because I didn't think I was an addict at all. I didn't think I was an alcoholic. My denial was so deep. Like, now I look back and I'm like, oh, ridiculous, but I really was in denial. Like, I thought my dad was an alcoholic. I thought that I was just bipolar, and that's what kind of happened. So they took me off some of the things I was on, but I kind of remember looking like I was a bit of a snob and thinking, oh, shame, look at everyone else detoxing. And like 2 or 3 days later, I started detoxing, and it was terrible. Like, I really started feeling like I was going to die. But it was a 12-step program. They didn't do the whole 12 steps. It was only 21 days. But there I started going to meetings every night. So I was like, I kind of started hearing things. I started hearing about God. Not that I believed in God, because I was like, God deserted me a long time ago. I started getting used to the meetings. And then I started hearing that this was a disease. And like, that didn't make sense to me at the beginning, because I felt like it was a bit of a cop-out. But the more and more I started listening to people, the more I started relating a little bit. But I did come out with it when you, like, Anyway, so at the treatment centre they decided I needed long-term treatment, so we started looking around, and I'd always felt connected to the sea, and so there were 2 rehabs here. That's where I really feel like God was already seeing my path. The one was very Christian, and at that stage I didn't believe in God, and the other one was no medication. So my dad didn't let me know, but he chose that one for me. Brian had even come down. He was in Joburg, and he came and he saw me, and he was explaining to me what was going to happen, and he's like, but it's up to you, like it's your choice to come off the medication. So when I got there, and Keith said, look, we don't do this here, we don't do anti-booze, and he started throwing all my medication, I started getting really nervous. We actually had a huge fight, and I slammed the door my first night there, because I was not willing to come off my medication. Like I really did believe like there was something seriously wrong with me. I'd been to psychiatrists for the last 7 years. Like they obviously had to know. Even when I left the treatment centre, the psychiatrist said, you're going to have to be clean for 2 years before you can come off your medication. So I had that in my head. But when I got there, things were very different. And then I started seeing people really happy, and they weren't on meds. This one was explaining to me, oh yes, I was on the same stuff, and look, I'm happy, and this one, and so that was where I felt like God was working, and I started becoming more willing to start thinking that maybe there is a life without it, and maybe I would be willing to try and change. And I remember going in and saying, okay, I wanted it on my terms though, but I'm willing to try and come off. I was on so much stuff that I think I was like on a 2 or 3 week detox program to come off everything. Eventually, I remember them wanting to cut my medication. I wanted to stab him with a knife because I was like, did not want to like come off. Like I was really dependent on it. Anyway, but eventually like I was willing, and I had a very, very bad detox. Like I know everyone thinks I had the worst detox, but I really felt like I had a bad detox from all the medication. I did my step 1 in I think it was 5 weeks. When I go back, like I don't understand how they could have even read it, because I would stop halfway, my brain would stop working, and like nothing really worked for a long time. And I was in treatment for 7 months. So I did my step 1, my step 2. I kind of started seeing, because I hadn't believed anymore. Like I stopped believing in God, and then I kind of saw where they say you've just got to start believing. Like it was weird for me. But all of a sudden something just clicked, and I remember Annie was my sponsor, and she took me outside, and she's like, can you just see how everything just kind of works? Something has to be, there was a huge tree, it's been cut down now, but there was a huge tree, and I could kind of see how everything kind of just worked together, like the moon and the bugs and the grass, and she's like, there's something bigger than you. And all of a sudden that just clicked, and I was like, okay, like I don't really want to believe it, but if I want to get better, I'm going to have to start believing in something bigger than myself. And it started off slowly. It started off with nature, and it kind of just got bigger and bigger. Around that time, every time I'd gone into rehab, I was in a dishonest relationship, because I always found someone that was either as sick as me or sicker than me, because I didn't want to deal with me. So I always got into a romantic or exclusive relationship in the treatment centre, and I tried it this time. And for the first time I got exposed, and it was really good for me. I believe if that hadn't happened in my recovery, like it would have been the same as every time else I'd gone in. It was horrible. The whole house told me how sick I made them. I had to look at myself. I got put on a man ban or boy ban at that stage it was called. And it was good for me to be able to see how I used the opposite sex to get what I wanted. So for the first time I had to like guard myself, and I had to look at myself. It was horrible. There were only, I think, 3 or 4 other ladies in the house. One was Wendy. And for the first time, I didn't trust women. I mean, every woman I'd had either died or kicked me out the house. So I didn't have much. All of a sudden, I had an older lady sponsor, and I had women that I had to trust for the first time. And it was good for me, because I had to lean on them. So when the man-boy ban was lifted, like I had to, go to the girls. Like it was the best thing that had ever happened to me, even though in the house it felt at the time it was the worst thing, because I got so many consequences, and I couldn't speak to my dad, and he was angry, but it was part of my treatment. Like I needed that stuff. So step 4, when I kind of started looking at my resentments, I obviously had 3-part resentments. I resented my mum for dying, I resented God, and I resented the Patco bus driver that killed my mum, like so badly that sometimes when I went into treatment, I tried to track him down. I wanted him to know. I had so much anger, like I wanted him to know what he'd done to me and how he had destroyed my life. like I wanted to make sure he was paying, like he must be in jail, or he must be dead, or he must be like that. That's how bad it was. And then obviously for my mom to do it to me, and God, like what the hell, like how could you do that to me? So that was my 3-part resentment that I had to kind of look at, I had to pray about. And the big part that I saw is that I manipulated. Like I used my mom's death from when I was 6 years old. Shame, my mom died, so I got everything I wanted. So I had to, as soon as I saw that I manipulated, like the resentment got a lot better. I had to pray for the Patco bus driver. Every time I used to see a bus when I was I wasn't driving, but when I was on the road, like I would shake and I would be. Eventually, that resentment kind of went away. Like, but I had to keep working at it. I had to keep praying about it. And God, obviously, I had to just like that was part of my journey. Like I've helped a lot of people with death, and that's probably why it's happened to me. I don't know, but like there's no mistakes, and that was part of my journey. When I kind of went through my defects, like a lot of them, I didn't know what I was controlling at all. Like when I did it, like a sort of fear of snakes, a fear of whatever. A lot of my defects only came out after I finished my 12 steps and when I was ready for the big world. Then I could kind of see control was a huge one for me, and fear. I had so much, I think because I'd been on so much medication and had buffered me for so long, like all of a sudden I was fearful of, I couldn't even go to work in the beginning, but I'll get to that. Amends as well, when I kind of looked at my amends list, obviously everyone wants to just rush out and do their amends. For me, I also waited a year to do a lot of them, but a lot of them have come through just life. Like God has presented things for me. The one amends for me was my great uncle wasn't even on my amends list, but being able to help him helped my family, and it kind of it let me make big amends to them. He came and lived here in Scotland, and we looked after him as best as we could. Until eventually, I think he was here for about a year and he died. But it was the biggest change in my recovery. Like eventually my family could see, and I wasn't even trying to make amends. Like I was doing what I was told. I was doing what I was taught, and that was how the amends was. The other big amends for me was with my best friend from active addiction. I was told to stay away from all people like that. And eventually, I think after about 6 or 7 years in recovery, we'd been friends on Facebook for about a year. And she messaged me and she's like, Trace, I'm in recovery now. And she had found a sponsor in Hillcrest that was a friend of mine. And she came to one of my meetings and I just burst into tears. I hadn't seen her for so long and I owed her so many amends. But it was kind of God bringing her back into my life. I landed up being her bridesmaid or a matron of honor to her wedding. We managed to sit on the beach and we both made amends to each other because she had done her program and I'd done mine. And we were able to talk, and it was one of the biggest God moments. But that was an amends that came to me. Like it was just, she's now out of the program again, but it was at that time was supposed to happen at that, at that moment. So yeah, those were the two really special amends for me. So then I finished my program. I finished and I'd been at treatment for 7 months. And I think my son's now had enough. All of a sudden I realized how fearful I was. I had to go find a job and I couldn't find anything around Scotland, so I went to Tracy and I landed up lasting half a day. My fear was so overwhelming. Like I was doing foils, I left foils on someone's hair and I left. I phoned the treatment center and I'm like, please come fetch me, because otherwise I was either going to drink at the coffee shop or I had to wait. And that was my turn in my recovery. And I waited and Rob actually came to fetch me. And I landed up crying for 3 days in treatment, thinking like I can't do this. But all I had to do is I had to do it slower than some people because of the amount of time I'd been on medication and the amount of medication. Like that's just my journey. Some people are fine, but for me it took longer, and I really took it on. I remember crying in dance group for about 3 days until eventually, like I had to do things differently, and I had to get a half-day job in Scotland and go back to the house and be okay. And then I could do a little bit longer because my self-obsession, I couldn't even answer the phone. And I worked with mirrors, and then I had to start seeing myself. So it was really hard for me. I spent my first year, I think, in the bathroom on my knees and speaking to my sponsor and at meetings because my self-obsession was so bad. But I'm glad. I feel like I was blessed with that fear because it kept me coming back. Because otherwise my other option was to use. I had no other option. So my first year was really, really strict. I was really rigid. I did everything I had to do. Actually for a very long time, like this became my life. Like I had no choice. And the longer I was in it, things started changing slowly for me. And that's what I was saying is what I saw with the messages this year, is I started seeing how things started changing for me. I slowly started feeling a bit better. My self-obsession at work, I got easier. So after 18 months, I left that job because I actually didn't really like hairdressing when I got back in. And I'd never worked on computers. Like, I'd never done anything like that. And I had someone that would teach me, and I kind of did that for 4 years. And in that time, I was able to make a lot of financial amends. So I finished paying all that stuff off. So that's kind of how my recovery went. It just went the next right thing, the next right thing, the next right thing. In that time, I'd always known Rob. Rob and I were in treatment together, but we were friends. And I think I was about 14 months clean, and he asked me out, and I wanted to die. We were both so nervous and shy, even though we'd been like best friends until then, and things kind of changed for us. But we did everything the right way. We both spoke to our sponsors. We both decided that we were going to try this. And we were going to try and take it slow, but addict style, that does not work with two addicts together. We started living together, and that's where a lot of my defects came out. I found out how controlling I was. I found out very, very controlling. Huge self-obsession, so there was a lot of growth when I got into a relationship, because I kind of had to practice this program within my relationship. You know, it was easier by myself, but with someone else it was quite difficult. So there was a lot of fighting and learning and whatever, but I would never change it for the world. But it was really, really difficult. There was a lot of growth in that. Within that time, I also, because of my self-obsession, my disease went another way. It went into food, or lack of food. I kind of went anorexic. Like, it's not really a good label, but that kind of way into my food. I wasn't willing to listen to anybody. Like, I thought I could do this myself. And eventually I reached rock bottom. I stopped smoking, and then all of a sudden the control went away, and I had to deal with it. I had to find another sponsor. My sponsor at the time had gone overseas, and the one sponsor I didn't want to have, because I had to deal with the stuff, was Nat. And she was the only person that was available and suited for me, and like, I kind of knew that I was going to have to deal with the stuff, but it was very difficult and very painful for me. All of a sudden I had no control. I started putting on weight, and I didn't like that, and I got to a stage where I didn't want to use. I was blessed with that, but I wanted to kill myself again. I got to a very, very low part in my recovery, where it was like I could either practice my program again, and it was like starting over again. Like, I had to do everything that I thought was right, I had to do differently. Like, whatever my head was telling me, I had to do opposite. I had to become willing to do stuff I didn't want to do, to let go of things I didn't want to let go of. But slowly, within that, I got better again, you know, and then with that, my relationship got better, and I started making friends again in recovery, because I became very isolated and very codependent in my relationship, which I didn't know, obviously, at the time, but that's what I did. So within that, I got better, but it was very painful at the time, but I'm grateful that that happened. It was like the other part of my layer of my recovery. Then we got married after 4 years, I think 6 years together, and it was an amazing day. We based our relationship on recovery just for today. We're going to try our best. We can't commit to ourselves like forever, but just for today, that's what we work on. And we had the most beautiful wedding. We paid for it ourselves. And it was very small and intimate, but it was just always based on our recovery, because that it is for both of us what's most important. And it was really special and beautiful. So then we got married, we came back, we had a beautiful honeymoon in Mauritius. So like all our gifts and that kind of came true. Then I had to go back I got retrenched around that time as well. And I had to go back into an industry I didn't want to go back into, which was hairdressing. But I've always just had to be willing. Like, even though I don't want to do it, and I fight with my sponsor and God, and I'm like, it's not fair. I kind of just have to go against my head and kind of do it. And in that, I work with another recovering addict who is amazing. Like, even though it's not where I would have seen myself, it's where God has put me, and I'm grateful for it. I do work with a good bunch of people. There's a lot of recovering people that always come in. I get to practice my program daily. So that was, I think this last year, like, I really wanted a different job, and it kind of didn't work out for me. and I was really angry with God, and I was angry with a lot of different people. But coming back, I've just been on maternity leave, and coming back, it's kind of where God wants me. Like, and I've had to accept that. And since my attitude has changed, like, everything is okay with it, you know. And then we had our son, sorry, I'm going backwards and forwards. Then we had our son 2 years ago, and that was a huge blessing in recovery. Like, I never thought that could happen. Like, but it just, it was life-changing. It was really, really beautiful, but really difficult because he had colic. One of the biggest growths is having children. Yeah. So then I remember sharing last year, it was for my 9 years, and everything was beautiful. I had a pink cloud, and I was so happy with my share, and then things changed really quickly for us. I think just a couple of weeks after I had my share, we found out we was at a daycare, at a day mom, and the guy that was there, the opa, he had hit Reeve with a hose pipe, and it was very traumatic. It doesn't sound so traumatic now, but when your son is in like the care of someone, it was very traumatic for us, and we kind of had to change things a lot. I had to put him in a school very quickly, and I didn't want to send him to school because I hated school so much, but I kind of had to let go of all those things. And then after that, I found out I was pregnant again, and we hadn't planned on having another baby, so that was also a lot of fear, huge fear for me. First of all, financial fear, and second of all, like, would we be able to cope with another one because we've got a live wire child. But God doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. And the third thing was I wasn't on medical aid because we weren't planning on having another child. My dad had gone through a lot of financial problems, and it had just been part of the medical aid, so that was another fear for me. And all of a sudden we were like, both of us had to go speak to our sponsors, and we were both told that God doesn't give you anything you cannot handle, and that it's a blessing, and we were both like, okay. So we kind of went against our heads, and we had to kind of deal with it, you know. And we tried to do a government route, but I had complications with my first pregnancy, so my second pregnancy we were worried, but we decided to kind of just go with it. And I landed up even sleeping one night in the government hospital. But what my point is, it's not about that stuff, it's about God, and kind of God looking after me as I got really sick really quickly again. My blood pressure was really high, and I remember we had to go to a different government hospital, and I was number 50 in the queue, and the night before I felt like I was going to die. I'd woken up Rob and I said, I don't know what we're going to do with Reeve, but I feel like I'm going to die. And we decided to wait till the next morning, and I get emotional because it was like God working. Like, if you've ever had any doubts on this program, I was sitting in the queue and we got a phone call to say, just get out, you need extra help and it's fine. Like, everything is paid for, everything is okay. And so we went to the doctor where I had my son. And he first said, no, he can't see me because he's going away and he's too busy and we must go and see another doctor in a day's time. And the next thing, this lady in front of us had a huge temper tantrum and left, and I got her appointment. I got my appointment before my friend who'd been waiting 2 weeks for her appointment. So it was kind of like how God had just steered the whole ship. And I landed up, like, yeah, it's still, like, every time I think about it, being willing to go to a government hospital, and probably a friend of mine had the same problems in a government hospital, lost her child like 2 months before me. I landed up being in a private hospital. Rob and I walked into this private room and they're like, this is your room. Like, things had just kind of changed. Like, God took care of everything. My baby landed up coming 2 months premature, so that was the scary thing because I was so sick. And we got told she had 98% survival rate. She was born very small but healthy, like nothing wrong with her, and that's like a miracle because my friend had lost her baby in the same situation. So I do get emotional about it because God kind of works. It was very difficult, and I remember we went to the doctor and he's like, no, you're staying and you're having the baby the next day. Like, I just prayed and everybody else was praying like this baby was going to be okay. One of my friends called her Princess Leia, a warrior princess, and that's what she was. Every milestone she just kind of got through. It was very scary. It was very like seeing a baby in an incubator for 3 weeks, being so powerless. It was very, and I had to leave her every day, which was really hard. But I kind of knew that God had this, and He has. Like, He's always had my back, and that's where if anything, in this program, I'm so grateful for that. Like, I'm grateful, like, I didn't turn my back on God. Like, He'd always had being part of my journey. I didn't want to cry, but she. So we did 3 weeks in hospital, and she came home, and then she's also got colic. So we've gone through quite a hectic time this year with having a tiny little baby with colic and a toddler. But like I keep saying, is God's always had my back. I've had to go back into my job that I didn't think I wanted, and I've gone to lots of extremes to try and get rid of, but I keep going back, and I've just gone back from maternity leave now. Now I'm okay, thanks. Thank you so much. So I'm really grateful for recovery, and I'm grateful for this program. I'm grateful I've got the opportunity. I sponsor quite a lot of girls that are have become my family. I really love them all. I know I give my sponsor some grey hair sometimes, but I love her too. It's the longest relationship I think I've ever had with anyone other than my husband, and I'm grateful for that. So I don't know how long I've shared for, or how long I've rambled on for, but I'm really grateful. I'm grateful to be here to share at this meeting, so thanks for letting me share.